The days that followed felt like a blur of meetings, decisions, and introductions to a world that was as cold as it was powerful. Bayo wasted no time in plunging me into the depths of his operations. His empire was vast, spanning across multiple sectors: real estate, finance, and technology. He was a force to be reckoned with, and his ambition knew no bounds. But it was more than just business. For Bayo, everything was a game, and he played to win. I had always been a careful, thoughtful person. I measured my words, my actions, and the consequences that came with them. But in Bayo's world, calculation was everything. I quickly learned that emotions were a weakness, a distraction from the ruthless pursuit of success. If I was going to thrive here, I had to shed the remnants of my old self. The woman who once believed in love, loyalty, and family had no place in Bayo's cold, calculating world. The first few weeks were a whirlwind. I attended meetings with executives, helped draft business plans, and learned how to negotiate with the cutthroat precision Bayo was known for. But as I grew more comfortable with my role, I began to notice things that made me uneasy. Bayo's methods weren't just hard-nosed, they were cruel. He would manipulate, deceive, and use people as pawns in his game. Employees who failed to meet expectations were swiftly dismissed, their careers destroyed with one call. Rivals who crossed him found themselves on the wrong end of dirty tricks, their reputations ruined beyond repair. And yet, despite everything, I found myself drawn to him. His power, his confidence, and the way he commanded respect, it was intoxicating. I had never felt so alive, so important. Every decision I made seemed to carry weight, every move calculated with precision. I was no longer the quiet, overlooked woman from the sidelines. I was someone who mattered. But as the months passed, the cracks in Bayo's empire began to show. His ruthless nature, which had once seemed so impressive, now made me question everything I had joined him for. I saw how he treated those who had been loyal to him for years, how easily he cast them aside when they no longer served his purpose. I watched as he used people's ambitions and dreams for his own gain, never once considering the collateral damage. One day, I overheard a conversation between Bayo and one of his top executives, a man named Tunji. They were in Bayo's office, unaware that I had entered the room. The tone of their conversation was casual at first, but then I heard something that made my blood run cold. "She doesn't know, does she?" Tunji asked, his voice low but clear. Bayo's response was even colder. "She's too focused on the power. She doesn't see the strings I'm pulling. She'll come around when the time is right. I've already planted the seed. She'll be just like the rest of them when I need her to be." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. She'll be just like the rest of them. My mind raced as I processed what I had just heard. Was this what Bayo thought of me? A pawn in his game? A tool to be used and discarded when he no longer had any use for me? I wanted to confront him then and there, to demand an explanation, but something held me back. I wasn't sure what, but I knew one thing: I couldn't let him see that I had overheard their conversation. I couldn't show him any sign of weakness. So I did what I always did: I kept my emotions in check and pretended as if nothing had happened. But deep down, I knew things would never be the same again. The man I had joined forces with, the man who had promised me power and success, was not the person I had thought he was. He had used me, just like he used everyone else. The following days were filled with tension. I worked harder than ever, burying myself in the details of Bayo's business empire, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling that had taken root inside me. But no matter how much I focused on the work, I couldn't shake the realization that I had been lied to. I had been a fool to think that power would fill the emptiness inside me. All I had gained was a cold, unfeeling world where betrayal and ambition were the only constants. One evening, after a particularly long meeting, I found myself standing alone in the balcony of Bayo's office, overlooking the glowing skyline of Lagos. The city stretched out before me, a vast, living entity. The lights, the traffic, the people, it all seemed so distant, so far removed from the chaos of my life. It was then that I heard the soft click of the door behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Bayo's presence was like a shadow, always looming, always in control. "You're quiet tonight," he remarked, his voice smooth but tinged with something I couldn't place. "What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, my heart racing. This was it. The moment of truth. I had to know if he was truly the man I thought he was. I had to confront him. "Why did you do it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you use me?" There was a brief silence, and then Bayo stepped forward, his gaze locked onto mine. His eyes were unreadable, but there was something in his expression that made me feel small, insignificant. "I didn't use you," he said, his voice calm, almost soothing. "You've always been a part of the plan," I attuned. "Don't you see? Everything I've done has been to bring us both to the top. Together, we're unstoppable." But his words fell on deaf ears. I could hear the lie in his voice, feel the coldness that had crept into my own heart. I turned away from him, unable to look at him any longer. "I don't know who you are anymore," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and betrayal. "I thought I was joining someone who would change the world. But you're just like everyone else. You don't care about anyone but yourself." The next morning, I packed my things and left. There was no confrontation, no final words. I knew that if I stayed any longer, I would lose myself completely. Bayo's empire was not mine to conquer. It was his, and I was just another pawn in his ruthless game. As I stood outside his office building, I took one last look at the city that had swallowed me whole. I had been so blinded by ambition and the promise of power that I had forgotten what truly mattered. But it wasn't too late. I would rebuild. I would find my own path. And this time, I would never let anyone use me again. It had been months since I walked away from Bayo's empire, from his cold, calculated world of power and ambition. Every day since, I had tried to rebuild my life, piece by piece, in a way that honored my values, my integrity, and the person I had once been. I found a job in a small but growing tech company in Lagos, working on projects that aligned with my passions, and began to reconnect with old friends who had long since drifted away as I had become absorbed in Bayo's world. Life, though challenging, was beginning to feel whole again. But there was still a part of me, deep inside, that wondered if Bayo had truly changed. The last words I had spoken to him were full of anger, but they were also full of truth. In the months since, I had realized that I could never escape him entirely. His presence still loomed in the back of my mind, like a shadow that refused to fade. It was on a cool evening in early summer when I received a message from an unknown number. The message was simple, the words brief. "Can we meet? I need to talk to you. Bayo." My heart skipped a beat as I read the message again. It had been so long since I heard from him, and the suddenness of his request sent a rush of conflicting emotions through me. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue moving forward with my life without looking back. But another part of me, the part that still cared for him, still wanted to believe that there was something redeemable about him, wanted to see him again. I hesitated for a long time before finally responding. "Where?" The next afternoon, I found myself sitting in a quiet cafe by the beach, waiting for Bayo. The waves crashed softly in the distance, and the smell of saltwater mixed with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. It was a far cry from the cold, clinical offices and boardrooms where we had once met. I didn't have to wait long. He arrived on time, dressed in a simple white shirt and dark jeans, looking different somehow. The sharpness that used to define him was gone, replaced by a weary, almost vulnerable expression. His eyes, once cold and calculating, were softer, filled with something I couldn't quite name. Bayo took a seat across from me, his gaze meeting mine, but there was no arrogance in his posture anymore. There was only uncertainty. "I've been thinking about you a lot," he started, his voice quieter than I remembered. "About what you said that day, when you left." I didn't respond immediately. I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear his explanation, but the silence between us stretched thin, and I couldn't avoid it forever. "What is it that you want, Bayo?" I asked, my voice calm but guarded. Why did you ask to meet? He sighed deeply, running his hand through his hair in frustration. I'm not good at this, talking about emotions, about what's really going on inside me. But I'm trying. I've been trying to figure out where I went wrong, where I let everything slip away. He paused, looking out at the horizon for a moment before meeting my gaze again. I was so focused on winning, on being the best, that I didn't see the damage I was causing, he continued, his voice thick with regret. I hurt you. I hurt the people I claimed to care about. And it wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I was afraid. Afraid of losing, of not being enough, of being weak. So I built this empire around me to protect myself. But I forgot what really mattered. I sat in stunned silence, absorbing his words. For the first time, I saw Bayo not as a man of power, but as a man who was deeply vulnerable, broken by his own ambition. The man who once used people as pawns in his game was now confessing the very things that had made him ruthless in the first place. I've hurt a lot of people, Ayatund, Bayo said, his voice trembling slightly. But you were different. I never meant to use you. I thought if I could show you my world, I could show you how powerful we could be together. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. His words hung in the air between us, and for a long moment I could only look at him. He had been the villain in my story, the person I had blamed for all the pain and disappointment in my life. But now, as he sat before me, showing his vulnerability, I saw something new in him, guilt, remorse, and a yearning for redemption. I'm not the same man I was before, he added quietly. I don't want to be that man anymore. I want to change. I want to do better. For you, for me. My heart ached as I listened to him. I had spent so long trying to distance myself from him, trying to move on and forget the feelings I had once had. But now, in front of me, was the man I had fallen in love with, the man who was willing to change, to fight for something better. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if Bayo's change was real, if it would last. But for the first time, I saw a flicker of hope. Maybe we could both rebuild ourselves, find our way back to each other without the shadows of our past hanging over us. I can't promise anything, Bayo, I said, my voice soft but firm. But I can't keep holding on to the past either. I don't know what will be, but I'm willing to give you a chance. A real chance. His eyes brightened, and a small, genuine smile played on his lips. That's all I need, Ayatund. Just a chance. A chance to prove to you that I can be the man you deserve. And in that moment, for the first time in a long while, I felt something I had almost forgotten. As the weeks passed, things between Bayo and I slowly began to shift. At first, it was awkward, those first steps toward rebuilding something broken always are, but over time, I started to see a side of Bayo I had never seen before. Gone were the walls of ambition and pride that had once separated us. In their place was a man who genuinely wanted to make amends. He would call just to check on me, not for business, but to ask about my day, my thoughts, my dreams. I could see the effort he was making, and it began to soften something inside me. We started spending more time together, not as business partners or the cold, distant people we had been before, but as two individuals trying to find their way back to each other. It wasn't easy. There were still moments when I questioned his sincerity, when old doubts crept in like shadows in the night. But each time Bayo opened up, each time he showed me his vulnerabilities, those doubts began to fade, little by little. We went on walks by the beach, sat in quiet cafes, and even took long drives to the outskirts of Lagos, just talking, laughing, and learning to trust each other again. He had let go of his desire for control, and I had let go of my resentment. There were no grand gestures, no sweeping declarations of love. Instead, it was the small moments, the shared glances, the late-night talks, the quiet smiles, that allowed our bond to heal. But healing wasn't just about Bayo and me. There was another wound, one that had festered for far too long, the rift between me and my sister, Amma. Amma and I hadn't spoken much since my decision to walk away from Bayo. The tension between us had reached its peak when I found out that she had secretly been seeing Bayo behind my back, long before we had ever started dating. She had always been the more assertive of the two of us, and it had never occurred to her that there were consequences to her actions. The betrayal I felt wasn't just from losing Bayo, it was from my own sister, the one person I thought I could trust above all others. But that was before Bayo had changed. That was before I had started to let go of the hurt and the anger. One afternoon, as I was going through some files in my apartment, I received an unexpected call. It was Amma. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft, almost hesitant. My heart raced. For months, I had pushed her out of my life, unsure if I could ever forgive her. But now, after everything with Bayo, I knew that the healing between us, too, had to begin. I agreed to meet her at a quiet restaurant in the city. It was a neutral space, no memories of old grudges, no place for arguments. Just two sisters, trying to find a way back to each other. When Amma arrived, she looked different. Her eyes were tired, her posture slumped, as if the weight of her own actions had finally caught up with her. I could see the regret in her eyes before she even spoke. "I owe you an apology," she began, her voice trembling. "I've been a terrible sister to you. I know I've hurt you, and I don't even know how to make it right." I stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air. I had wanted to hear this for so long, but now that it was happening, I wasn't sure what to feel. There had been so much anger, so much bitterness, that it was hard to see the sister I once loved in the woman sitting before me. "I took so many things from you, Ayatund," Amma continued. "I didn't mean to hurt you, but I did. I thought I was just following my own desires, my own dreams, and I didn't stop to think about how my actions affected you. I never understood how much I had hurt you until everything fell apart." I took a deep breath, the words I had been holding onto for so long finally bubbling to the surface. "You took everything from me, Amma. Bayo, my trust, my belief in you as my sister. But I also know that I wasn't innocent. I've been holding on to anger for so long, and maybe it's time for me to let go, too." She looked at me, eyes wide with surprise, and I saw a tear slip down her cheek. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to make things right. I've seen how Bayo has changed, and I know I've done a lot of damage. I want to be a better sister to you, Ayatund. Please, let me try." The pain of everything that had happened still lingered in my heart, but for the first time, I saw a glimmer of the sister I had once loved. She wasn't the perfect person I had imagined her to be, but neither was I. And maybe, just maybe, there was room for both of us to grow. "I'm not ready to forget everything, Amma," I said quietly. "But I am willing to move forward, to rebuild what we had. I don't expect things to go back to the way they were, but we can start again." Amma's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to hold my hand. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for giving me a chance." As I looked at my sister, the weight of our past began to lift, just a little. There would be no magic moment where everything was healed instantly, but there was hope. Hope that, like Bayo and I, Amma and I could rebuild the trust that had been shattered. The wounds we had inflicted on each other might never fully heal, but they could scar over with time, as long as we were both willing to try. And so, with each day, our love grew, slowly, cautiously, but steadily. In the quiet moments of reflection, I realized that love was never about perfection. It was about growth, forgiveness, and the willingness to rebuild what had been broken. Bayo and I weren't perfect, and neither was Amma. But together, we were learning how to love in a way that was real, raw, and filled with the understanding that true love wasn't just about holding on, it was also about letting go. Letting go of past hurts, past mistakes, and giving ourselves the chance to create something new. And as I walked hand in hand with Bayo, looking out at the horizon, I knew that this new chapter was only just beginning.